Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Stott and I'm the Emperor of Stomaria. Today we're going to be discussing the former member states and observer states of the Empire. Now, Stomaria was actually founded in June 2019, but it really wasn't until August 2021 when the Empire of Stomaria really started to take shape, when we had the Kingdom of Wayward, which was an ally of Stomaria up to that point, becoming integrated into the Empire as our first ever associated state, something that we now define as a member state. But from there, our expansion was relatively rapid. We had the Kingdom of Norwick, the Princedom of Morland, the Kingdom of Molossia, the Republic of Vesta and the Duchy of Bran all being integrated into the Empire over the course of a year or so. However, in December 2022, two member states of the Empire withdrew their membership of the Empire, and this prompted us to introduce stricter criteria for those that wanted to become integrated into the Empire as member states. In fact, once we introduced this stricter criteria, we actually revoked the membership of two existing member states of the Empire because they didn't meet the thresholds that we had introduced, and they had no intention of meeting those thresholds going forward. Now, since then, we have not allowed any other entity, any other community, any other aspirant nation to become integrated into the Empire as a member state, or even an external ally at this moment in time, because the criteria, again, has become a lot stricter. It's been a lot harder to associate with Stomaria in any formal capacity. But that's not from a lack of trying. We've had some 60 applications to become an ally of Stomaria and another 30 applications to become integrated into the Empire as member states. Not a single one of them has been successful to date because of the criteria that we now have. However, I thought that it might be a good idea, an interesting video, to actually look at the former associates of the Empire, these former observer states, these former member states, these former associates of the Empire in some form or another, and see what they're doing and how they're progressing, or if they're even still around. So that is what this video is about. Now, there isn't a huge amount to say about Norwick, in the sense that it was based in New Zealand and it was founded by Mika. Now, Mika actually joined as a Stomarian citizen before Norwick became integrated into the Empire. So once she joined as a citizen, and I became aware of Norwick, we had a brief conversation and we decided to integrate Norwick into the Empire as our first ever observer state, whereas the Kingdom of Wayward shortly beforehand became our first associated state. Now, the difference is that the observer state is an entry-level tier, or certainly was an entry-level tier, in which aspirant communities or aspirant nations could become involved in the Empire. They could join the Empire, even if they didn't have land that they had some authority or control over, in the sense that in Stomaria, we consider territorial holdings to be that of land which the governing authority of that nation or that community actually has some control or authority over. So a public park, or claiming parts of Antarctica or parts of the moon or whatever else, this is all irrelevant to us. We do not count that as territory, even if that community or nation does. And so the observer state was established, was created as a way for nations and communities that didn't have territorial holdings from our own perspective to become integrated into the Empire as they work towards achieving that goal, as they work towards actually attaining that land. Now, all of that is to say that Norwick, when they joined, did become our first observer state, and from that point on, they really went very, very quiet. So we did attempt to reach out numerous times for a long period of time in trying to get them more heavily involved in Stomaria itself, in the Empire itself. But we just never heard back from them since, I think it was October 2021 when they actually joined, was the last time we actually heard from them. However, because Norwick was still contributing financially to the Empire, because Mika was still a citizen of Stomaria, there wasn't any real reason to penalise them from that. They had already joined the Empire, they were still contributing financially, they were still ticking all the right boxes as far as we were concerned, as far as the criteria was concerned at that time. That is what mattered. They were still doing exactly what they were doing, and they weren't bringing Stomaria into dispute. They weren't damaging us in any way or harming us in any way. They just weren't particularly active at that time. And that persisted for, well over a year. So it was between October 2021 right up until February 2022 when we did introduce stricter criteria. Sorry, it was February 2023 when we did introduce stricter criteria. We decided to, again, reach out to Norwick and say, are you still interested in getting involved in Stomaria and the Empire and trying to actually build a community and all the rest of it? But we just never heard back from them. And because some of the new criteria that we had as of December 2022 was revolving around activity, around being active, around being engaging with not just Stomaria, but the other member states of the Empire, they were falling short of that, and so we had no choice but to revoke their membership. Even though that we gave them ample opportunity to get involved, we still haven't heard from Norwick to this day. And their social media presence, even when they were briefly around and we were in contact, was non-existent. As far as I know, they didn't have a YouTube channel, they didn't have a Twitter account, they didn't have a Facebook page, they didn't have a website, they just had a Reddit account which hasn't been used since, I think, 2022. So again, it's just, as far as we're concerned, it was a non-entity. It had become a flag on our website with a single inactive individual running the show, but it wasn't a community, it wasn't a nation, and so it wasn't right from our own perspective to promote them as a member state or an observer state or some kind of community or nation within the Empire, because in reality they just weren't meeting that threshold, they weren't meeting that criteria. And so while we wish them no ill, we just had to remove them from the Empire, we had to revoke their membership. And so that was the the history of Norwick in a nutshell, in the sense that, as I say, there's not a huge amount to say. They joined in October 2021, we never heard from them again, but they still contributed financially to Stomaria and to the Empire. But because of the stricter criteria that we introduced in December 2022, we had to revoke their membership in February 2023. And that is the long and the short of it. That's the history of Norwick within the Empire. Now, Morland was based in Jersey and founded by Alexander. And interestingly, they were actually an external ally of Stomaria before they became integrated into the Empire as another observer state. But unlike Norwick, Morland actually showed a great deal of potential within the Empire, and they were initially very heavily involved in the Empire before things started to go awry. There was trade, commerce, and enterprise, as you might expect. Alexander attended imperial court meetings. We commissioned artwork on behalf of Morland, and Alexander actually contributed so much financially to Stomaria itself that he was appointed as a Lord of Stomaria in January 2022, even before Morland became an ally of Stomaria. A trip was even planned with Alexander due to meet with King Raoul and myself later on in that year. However, after a few months of quite intense activity within the Empire, Alexander did have to actually take a step back for some personal reasons, which isn't an issue from our own perspective. We all have to take time out to deal with personal issues. We all have our own lives and all the rest of it, which sometimes has to take precedence over promoting the nations and the communities that we're aspiring to build. So that wasn't an issue in itself. But the issue was that we literally didn't hear from Alexander for the better part of half a year. We did briefly get back in touch with him towards, I think, December 2022, but by January 2023, communication had ceased entirely, and there didn't seem to be any way back for Morland into the wider community that we were establishing. And it wasn't just us that had this issue, in the sense that Morland quite clearly was no longer an entity. They weren't really building that community at all. They had their social media accounts, their YouTube channel, their Facebook page and all the rest of it, all deleted. It wasn't a case of Morland leaving the Empire, it was more of a case of them just dissolving before our very eyes. But before they did sort of have the final nail in the coffin, they still had a social media presence of sorts, even though if it was inactive. By the time we actually decided to revoke their membership at the same time as Norwick in February 2023, again because of the stricter criteria that we brought in, and again giving them ample opportunity to get involved, but they just didn't have the interest or the capacity to actually continue going down this route, continue promoting Morland, to continue establishing this nation. I don't actually know the reasons why. I don't know the ins and outs of all of the personal issues Alexander was dealing with. I don't know why Morland was shelved entirely and he thought it necessary to delete everything to do with Morland in the social world, in the social space, all of his accounts being deleted and all the rest of it. You know, I believe he even changed his number, because I've certainly not been able to reach him since, despite one or two attempts to do so, just not for the purposes of trying to reintegrate Morland into the Empire, just purposes of checking up on them and making sure they're all right, as I do for others that have been affiliated with Stomaria in the past on a personal capacity. I just like to make sure that everyone's okay, as we'll probably explore a little later in this video. But Morland, as I say, I think it's quite confident in that they are dissolved in their entirety. I don't think they're around anymore. I've certainly seen no evidence they're around anymore. I think, like Norwick, they just quietly, went out the back door and just, went out not with a bang but with a whimper, which is a shame, because I quite liked Alexander. I liked working with him. I thought he did show a great deal of potential. But at the end of the day, if it's not going to be something that they're interested in pursuing, then we're not going to force the question. We're not going to force them to actually push on with this, because it does take a great deal of dedication and time and effort and resources to actually make this successful, and not everyone's cut out for it, frankly. So again, that was the history of Morland within the Empire. A short period in which they were heavily involved and heavily active and showed a great deal of potential, and then it just became very clear on the lead up to their having their membership revoked that they just weren't going to be able to stand the test of time. And so in February 2023, after a year or so of being involved in the Empire in some form or another, we decided to revoke the membership, and they, I think, deleted everything shortly after that. So that was the history of Morland within the Empire. Seleucia was based in Germany, and it was founded by Neve. Now, interestingly, Seleucia actually followed a similar path to Norwick in terms of being integrated into the Empire. That is to say, Neve actually joined Stomaria as a private citizen before I even knew what Seleucia was. However, when King Raoul of Wayward actually found out about Seleucia and told me about it, I reached out to Neve and we had a conversation about potentially integrating the Seleucia into the Empire as an observer state, something that she was quite receptive to, and quite surprised, I think, that I had even mentioned it in the first place. And so Seleucia was integrated as an observer state in March 2022. Now, while Neve frequently attended Imperial Court meetings, she wasn't especially active in promoting Seleucia through social media, and the only real-world interaction we ended up having with Seleucia is when Neve sent us a golden griffin pin badge that she bought from a merchant, and we ended up sending her a silver stater coin as a token of thanks. Later on, in December 2022, Neve decided to leave the Empire along with Bran because she didn't approve of the term observer state being applied to Seleucia. Now, in January 2023, Neve actually released another video, an hour long, that tried to establish a false narrative as to why Seleucia had actually left the Empire, which was rebuffed in some detail in our own video in August 2023. Now, during this time, Bran, which, as I said earlier in this video, left the Empire as well in December 2022, actually joined Seleucia as a province. And Neve actually went to go visit Bran in Transnistria in May 2023, and I know as much because she told me as much. And this little point here is something that you should put a pin on, because it will become relevant later on in this video. However, just to get back on track a little bit, regards to Niamh, I hold no ill will. On a personal level, I quite like Niamh. I thought Selassie had a lot of potential, and I thought Niamh had a lot of potential, which is why they were integrated into the Empire as an observer state in the first place. And it was a shame that she left in the way that she did. However, as it might become clear later, it may be the case that she might have been pushed unduly from certain circles into making that decision, but we'll discuss that in a little bit. But regardless, I don't hold any ill will towards Niamh, I don't hold any ill will towards Selassie. Now, in terms of what Selassie is actually doing these days, I'm not really sure, in the sense that even when Selassie was involved in the Empire, they weren't very active on social media. I think they posted one video on their YouTube channel while they were in the Empire, and maybe made a post or two on their Facebook page or something. It wasn't nothing significant over the course of a year or so. So it's not unusual from my own perspective to see that there's no activity or very little activity on Selassie's social media pages or groups or forums or channels or whatever else. In fact, I think the last time that any content was published or created was some 9 months ago. Their most popular video and the last actual video that they created, or Niamh created, was again back in January 2023. So it's been quite some time since any updates have been made regarding Selassie. So I'm not actually sure what the status is for Selassie. I did reach out to Niamh, and I have reached out to Niamh a few times over the course of the year, just to check up on her, or just to make her aware of certain things that she might want to be aware of, which again we'll get onto later. But in fact, the last time I actually reached out to Niamh was only, I think a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, where I actually invited her to the Imperial Summit, not as a representative of Selassie, but just in a personal capacity, because Selassie obviously doesn't have any formal affiliations with Stomaria or the Empire, and so long as Bran, for reasons we'll get into later, is affiliated with Selassie, we can't affiliate formally with Selassie. So that's the issue we have there. But on a personal level, on a personal capacity, quite happy to bury the hatchet and establish those bridges on a personal level. So we don't have any issues there. I don't have any animosity or anything on that front. So as I say, I don't wish Selassie ill. In fact, in the last message that I sent her, I actually hoped that Selassie would start posting some updates, because I'd be interested to know what they're actually doing, if anything. But the chances are it's one of two things. They've either, again, quietly dissolved in the same way that Norwick and Morland have, and just kind of petered out, or they're in some kind of hibernation mode, which Selassie has been known to do from time to time. So it's a case of I don't really know what the situation is with Selassie. I hope that they're still around. I hope they're still active. I hope there's something going on, but I honestly don't know. But that is, in a nutshell, the history of Selassie within the Empire. It was a case of being quite, having a lot of potential, having some involvement in sort of trade and commerce, or gift giving, if nothing else, attending Imperial Court meetings and all that jazz. But then kind of left quite abruptly, to the surprise of many, I think. But I think perhaps being unduly nudged in that direction by more nefarious forces, which we'll discuss next. So again, that is the history of Selassie within the Empire. Bran was the last entity to be permitted to join the Empire in November 2022, and was the first to leave in December 2022. And you would think that having such a short time within the Empire would mean that there wasn't much to talk about. But unfortunately, for the wrong reasons, there is. Now, Bran was based in Transnistria, and was founded by what turned out to be a very, very strange man, whose name I do not use in the public space, not because I have some animosity on that front, but because he told me not to use his name in the public space, because he wasn't sure how the Transnistrian authorities were going to treat what he was doing out there, in the sense that he was trying to establish Bran as this nation or this community, but he wasn't sure how the Transnistrian authorities were going to view that, so he wanted to keep a low profile. And again, this will be quite important later on in this video. Now, while he was a member state of the Empire, this was perhaps the biggest mistake that I ever made as the Emperor of Stomaria, to be allowing this individual to become associated with Stomaria. Because in the short time that he was there, he gave nothing to the Empire, but he caused a lot of problems, or certainly made us rethink the criteria that we were looking for when it came to people becoming integrated into the Empire. Because, as I say, it was one of the biggest mistakes that I ever made as the Emperor of Stomaria in involving him in the Empire. And this stems from the fact that over the course of about 4 or 5 weeks, there was an application process in which Bran was trying to become associated with the Empire. Now, this should already ring alarm bells because it normally only takes a week or so for an applicant to get a yes or no from us. But with Bran, as I say, it took a month. And that's partly because he couldn't pull himself together in coming up with a suitable name or creating a suitable flag that he was going to stick with. But it's also because I had some grave reservations about permitting Bran to join the Empire. I didn't like his mannerisms, I didn't like the area in which he was based, and the more I learned about it, the less I liked it. But for all of that, we gave him the benefit of the doubt. We gave him the chance to see what could come of this. Now, as I say, he was in the Empire for such a short period of time that he really didn't offer anything. There's no history there. In fact, I tell you what, the one thing that he actually contributed to the Empire was that during Imperial Court meetings, because of his long rambling rants, we had to, for the first time, introduce agendas to the meeting to make sure that we kept on track, that we had a sort of a timed and ordered schedule of events. We never had to have that before because it was never an issue, but because he kept on going about nothing constantly, there was some question mark as to whether or not he was actually, drunk or whatever else during these meetings because of the way he presented himself. That's his contribution to the Empire. We have agendas now for Imperial Court meetings when we have them because of his rambling nonsense. That's the contribution Bran made to the Empire. Now, they actually left the Empire in December 2022 along with Neve. And again, this was the major issue from our own perspective because Bran had such little in the way of history within the Empire, such a little in the way of contributions, that it wasn't really worth us concerning ourselves over. It was nothing particularly relevant. We were a bit more upset that Neve decided to leave, obviously, because she had been there longer, because I actually liked Neve, I actually liked working with Neve. It was a shame that she left, but as with all member states and observer states, or those that want to associate or affiliate with us with some way, if they don't want to join, or they don't want to remain a part of the Empire, then I will never attempt to keep them. I will never force to keep them. I will never bend to demands being made of me. I'll simply wish them all the best for the future, and that'll be that. And that's all it was. But as it turns out, him leaving was the best thing that could have happened as he proceeded to expose himself over the following months. Using the same social media accounts that he used to represent Bran, not least on Reddit and YouTube, he started to publish videos of butterflies copulating. He made gummy bear sex tapes. He commented on pornographic material which is too graphic for me to share here. He built shrines to Lenin. He doctored a video of me as a half-naked woman in chains, which he sent to me privately before attempting to intimidate me by threatening to publish such content on Reddit, and then started calling me repeatedly in the middle of the night. All very strange behaviour, which would obviously had Bran expelled from the Empire 10 times over had they not left of their own accord. But the main issue wasn't all of that. It was the fact that they were insisting on trying to recruit people online through Reddit or Discord or YouTube or wherever else, and trying to encourage people to move in with him, to live with him in Transnistria. Now, this was an issue from our own perspective because a lot of people associated Bran with Stomaria at that time. Most people had never heard of Bran before Stomaria had actually advertised them as being an entity that was now part of the Empire. And had they not known that they were no longer a part of the Empire, then they would have associated their recruitment campaign with Stomaria. And I know this because we began to receive messages and emails from people who had either been contacted by Bran or seen Bran advertisements and were asking us if it was safe to move to Transnistria. which of course we said that it was not likely going to be safe in Transnistria, because for those that don't know, Transnistria is an unrecognized breakaway state in Moldova, which is considered by the European Council to be under Russian military occupation. It is an area, as I say, a breakaway state, with the governing body actively encouraging Russia to come and annex them. They want to be annexed by Russia. They want to be a part of the Russian Federation. And Transnistria, for those that don't know, and they don't know their geography in their area, is bordered to Ukraine. And one of the objectives, according to a Russian general during the opening months of the Ukrainian-Russian war, was that they wanted to create a land corridor to Transnistria. So yeah, no, it's not probably the best place to be at the moment, and it's certainly not somewhere I would ever encourage someone to move to, for various obvious reasons. But again, that was being associated with Stomaria, so we promptly put out a video to explain that this had nothing to do with us. Bran was not associated or affiliated with Stomaria in any shape or form, and this recruitment campaign had nothing to do with what we were trying to build. And that was, as far as we were concerned, the end of the matter on that front. And we only have had, I think, one person contact us since then about moving to Transnistria. So I think people have got the message at this point, which is exactly what we wanted to do. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, Bran was a province of Saloia during this time, and so wasn't exactly representing Saloia in a glowing light. Now, Niamh was not aware of a lot of this activity as it transpires, and one of the last videos that Bran actually put out was a video in which he was going on about my genitalia, which doesn't come as a major surprise to the people that actually know Bran and the way he goes about himself. But he also goes on to say that his intention from the start was to steal Niamh away from the Empire. He wanted to join the Empire to steal Niamh away.
Now, the issue was that they were already part of a community, as I'm sure you know. That community, in order to bar people from freely trading and interacting with each other, needed to get involved, get into the middle, and get in the way, basically. So, to get closer to Niamh and the Kingdom of Saloia, we had to sign up. So we did. Things were okay. We were chatting to Niamh, and we were achieving our goals and our aims, until one night where, what should we call him? The Pound Store Palpatine decided to have a hissy fit over absolutely nothing. Something an adult would have talked about. His ego just totally overrode his brain, and he flipped out, totally unreasonable, and it was clear that he could not, in any capacity, represent me and what I was trying to do. So Niamh and I had a brief chat whilst this was going on, and we decided to leave, to drop him and his organisation like a freshly shat pair of knickers, frankly. He showed himself to be the sweaty shit yogurt that he absolutely is, and that's not something we're interested in. And so we moved on. I managed to steal away Queen Niamh, as was always my intention, to be honest. I managed to steal away Queen Niamh, as was always my intention, to be honest.
And then he goes on to say that Niamh is his god queen, and that I was committing heresy for calling her out on some of the things that she mentioned about me and about us in the video that she published in January 2023, when she was talking about why Saloia left the Empire.
It's borderline heresy. She's our god queen. You're going to commit heresy? Well, we're not going to stand for that. It's borderline heresy. She's our god queen.
So this combination of him wanting to steal Niamh away and referring to her as his god queen, and people committing heresy against his god queen, added into the fact that when I watched that video, it was the first time that I had realised that Niamh had actually gone to visit Bran in Transnistria by herself. And I said to King Raoul, because it was King Raoul that actually made me aware of this video, I didn't come across it myself, and I watched it. And I said to him that it actually made my skin crawl listening to it. And it really put me on edge, so much so that I actually reached out to Niamh personally to tell her about this video. and to, say, I know we've had a bit of a history, we've had a bit of a past, it's fine, whatever, we'll, water under the bridge, whatever else, but please, whatever you do, if you have to respond to what we've said in the past or whatever else, do so, but please, if you're going to go to Transnistria in the future, please at least go with someone else. Do not go by yourself to visit this very strange man in this breakaway state under Russian military occupation. It's just not a good idea. And I was just, I was filled with a sense of dread and a sense of guilt. Because in my mind, and I think I told Neve as much, I have almost forced this position to be the reality, in the sense that Neve would probably never have been affiliated or associated with Bran Howell at all, had Bran Howell not been permitted to join the Empire. Had Neve not felt inclined to leave the Empire, with some nudging from Bran Howell, as it turns out, orchestrated or not, she would have never had to associate with him in a personal capacity, just between those two. And this again, the video itself is incredibly disturbing for me. And Neve actually replied to this message that I sent out, saying, I've seen this video that he's put out, I've seen the messages, and all the rest of it, but just look after yourself and all that jazz. She responded by saying she hadn't actually seen the video, and so she said, "Give me a minute, I'm going to have a look at it." And in her words, she said that she was shocked, and she was literally shaking, and she was so distraught, I think is probably the right word to use. And she said that she was going to tell him to take that video down, and if she didn't, then she was going to make a video herself about the matter. And so that video obviously did come down. Now, that was the last time Bran Howell actually posted anything, as far as I know, related to Bran Howell, in the sense that since then there's been a couple of cat videos, but nothing more beyond that. They had their social media accounts, their Reddit account, I think it was, suspended or deleted, either by Reddit or by them themselves, which is, of course, where they, published a lot of their nefarious activities in the public space. But since then, they've, I think, withered on the vine and died a death. There is a working theory in some circles where Neve basically cut Bran Howell loose at that point, but because Bran Howell was probably not inclined to actually comment on that sort of thing, they didn't want to say that they had been kicked out of Saloia or whatever else, and Neve doesn't post on social media much anyway. Maybe it just wasn't reported or acknowledged, but that's just a theory. But it might go some way into explaining why Bran Howell doesn't post much about Bran Howell, and certainly doesn't post about Saloia. With regards to Neve, I don't know what the situation is with Saloia and Neve either, so no one really knows what's happened there, but it looks like there might have been some kind of fallout, because, as I say, it's been many, many months since Bran Howell actually posted anything related to Bran Howell, and it's just been largely related to cat videos. So, that is the history of Bran Howell within the Empire, which transpires that 4 weeks can transcend far beyond that if the association lingers. And so it seems pretty clear from my own perspective that Bran Howell is, again, the biggest mistake that I ever made in allowing them to join the Empire. But I am hoping in the fullness of time that, with Neve and Saloia in particular, if they are still around, if they're still engaged in those kind of activities, if they're kind of working towards building a community and a nation and all that jazz, if they're still working towards that, I'm hoping in the fullness of time they will, if they haven't already, get rid of Bran Howell, so we can start to forge some kind of friendship in a more formal capacity. But again, that remains to be seen. This is just the status, as far as I know, of all of the former affiliates of the Empire. So I don't actually have much more to go on than what most people can see. I have a little bit of behind the scenes kind of information, which again, I've just relayed to everyone here. But aside from that, I can see what most other people can see, and what most people can see and everyone else can see is that not a lot is going on with any of these entities. So that's where we're at with that one. And I think, just to finish off, it's quite interesting to me to see the contrast between even those that were permitted to join the Empire, some people that we thought we had potential, some nations that we had potential, and then you had Stomaria and the current member states of the Empire as things stand. and that the contrast is quite telling, in the sense that Stomaria has gone on to, bigger and better things. Wayward's going on to bigger and better things. Vesta, acquired, during the time that Vesta's been a part of the Empire, they went from an observer state to a member state, and they acquired 40 acres of land. Wayward's expanded its community. It's really professionalized and streamlined its own territory. It's at Wayward South and is looking to purchase the next territory. They recently got a catering van to engage in some business enterprises in order to raise revenue, to again expand what Wayward's doing. Stomaria's obviously got southward, which has been developed and refined and really turned into something quite amazing from our own perspective. And so, the contrast between those that want to actually dedicate a lot of time, energy and resource into something, and those that just aren't that fussed about it, it is quite telling. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to leave it there. I do hope you enjoyed this video, because it's something that I have been meaning to make for a little while now, but it just gives people an idea of where all of our former associates, all of our former member states and observer states, or whatever else they might have been defined as at the time, where they're at the moment. And hopefully we'll see at least one of them come back to the light before too long. If you want to show your support for Stomaria or play an active role in our development and expansion, you can join as a citizen through the links below. Otherwise, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to our YouTube channel. We'll catch you in the next one.